When you think of Airbnb's competition, you might think of their competition being vacation rental companies like VRBO and HomeAway, or typical hotel chains like Hilton and Marriott. But thinking of Airbnb in terms of fighting for market share for vacation accommodation is, I think, missing the big picture of the type of company Airbnb is. To give you a glimpse of the type of company Airbnb is, I want to read you an excerpt from Airbnb's S1 filing. After a prolonged period of time working remotely, for some, work from home will become work from any home, and the line between traveling and living will blur. The once a year, 2-week vacation will be stretched into extended stays, and people will want to feel connected to their new communities they stay in. And after continued time spent in isolation, people will yearn for human connection and new experiences. We will be designing for this new world. Airbnb is predicting that the line between traveling and living will blur. We're living in an era where more and more people are working from home. So instead of people asking for a vacation to go travel to popular tourist destinations, this technology is allowing people to just literally live anywhere they want. They can go spend weeks or even months in, let's say, Hawaii or Las Vegas without their boss even finding out, as long as their work gets completed on time. But it's not just these popular tourist destinations that people will want to stay in. People will also want to stay in places that are not really considered popular tourist destinations. For example, a software engineer who lives in San Francisco may want to stay near his parents who live in Dayton, Ohio, or an accountant who is based out of Los Angeles may want to stay near her grandma who lives somewhere in Taiwan. I think there's going to be a greater need in the future for what I'll call semi-long-term rentals, meaning that people will want to stay in places for weeks or even months at a time. But don't just take my word for it. According to the latest Airbnb quarterly earnings, about a fourth of all nights booked are tied to reservations for long-term stays, meaning 28 days or greater. This is up from just 14% back in 2019. And additionally, over 50% of all nights booked are tied to reservations for 7 days or more. The numbers are clearly showing that the demand is growing for people who want to live this nomadic lifestyle. But people who want to book these semi-long-term stays don't want to pay an arm and a leg to do so. Staying at a hotel for this long of a period is just way too expensive, so that's why people are turning to Airbnb. For example, let's say I wanted to stay in Hawaii for a month. I can easily get an Airbnb on the main island for under $2,500 a month, where I can do my own laundry, cook my own meals, have my own parking spot, and have plenty of room to work. Compare this to a hotel room where if I'm lucky, I can get a hotel room for $200 per night. If you multiply 200 by 30, that's $6,000 per month. So the choice here is really easy for these digital nomads. On top of this, hosts are more incentivized to host long-term stays over short-term stays. It takes about 10 times the amount of effort to host 10 guests per month versus just one guest per month. And the earnings are roughly about the same. Yes, it's slightly more profitable to host 10 short-term guests versus just one long-term guest, but it's just so much easier. As a host myself, I definitely prefer hosting long-term guests over short-term guests. Also, as an Airbnb host, I can never see myself becoming a regular landlord. The process of getting a regular tenant through the rental market is just so much more complicated compared to getting a guest on the Airbnb platform. In order to get a tenant, I'll have to list my property on multiple platforms. I'll have to meet a lot of potential tenants. I'll show them around the property, and then I'll have to screen them all, do background checks, do credit checks. I'll pick one at the end and then draft up a rental agreement, and then hopefully every month I can collect a rent check from them. On Airbnb, it's just one platform. All I need to do is furnish my place, which of course is the hardest part. But after I furnish my place, all I need to do is take pictures, write a description, and then I can post my listing. Airbnb takes care of the rest. They look for the guests for me, they collect the payment for me, and if something goes wrong, most of the time they will insure me. So I think that more and more landlords will start to catch on that Airbnb is superior than listing on the regular rental market. But the reasons why regular landlords are not using Airbnb as a way of income is for a couple reasons. The first reason is that they are attracted to the passiveness of getting a tenant and collecting rent every month. But all they have to do is realize that they can list on Airbnb and filter for guests that are looking to stay at places for 30 days or more. If they did that, they would find that the income from Airbnb is still relatively passive if they just filter their guests for guests who are looking to stay at places for 30 days or more. The other reason is that landlords are not sure if the demand is there for 30-day plus rentals. But I think that this market is currently underserved and the demand will continue to grow over time. Airbnb benefits from this network effect where as the demand grows for these semi-long-term rentals, people will start to realize that the demand is there, so this will drive supply. As supply goes up, there will be more selection on the platform, and this will drive demand. And then on top of that, when people start to go use these long-term rentals more, they'll start to realize, hey, like my place over here is being vacant for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and I could just list my place on Airbnb while I go live in Hawaii for 3 months. And then that will drive supply, which will drive more demand, which will drive supply. And then Airbnb is just there growing the market and collecting a transaction fee for every transaction that goes through. Airbnb is just in a great spot to benefit from this growing market. And sure, VRBO and HomeAway may also benefit from this market, but I see Airbnb benefiting a lot more compared to those companies. The reason for this is that VRBO and HomeAway are owned by Expedia Group, and I would imagine that people who are booking VRBOs and HomeAways, I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine that they are booking those places through the Expedia website. So when you book through the Expedia website, you're not necessarily looking for a long-term stay where you want to stay there for a month at a time. You are looking to book there because you want to book for your next vacation, your short-term vacation that is 7 days or less. When you compare this to Airbnb, Airbnb gets over 90% of their traffic organically, meaning that they don't need to spend any money to acquire these transactions. So if you're looking to stay at a place long term, you're probably just gonna go on the Airbnb website and book directly. I mean, I don't really understand why guests would book at a VRBO over Airbnb. The only reason I could see that is that maybe VRBO has a different inventory compared to Airbnb. But as a host, why would I host on VRBO and not Airbnb? I would want to host where the market is the largest, that has most exposure to the most amount of guests. So if I were to host on VRBO, I would probably also cross-host on Airbnb. If I were to host on Airbnb, I may not necessarily cross-host on VRBO. I think this is a winner-take-most type of market. And when this market eventually matures, I think Airbnb will dominate in this market. I said earlier that hosts would probably prefer to host a small amount of long-term guests compared to a large amount of short-term guests. And I think this is true on the Airbnb side as well. I think Airbnb would rather support a smaller amount of long-term guests compared to a large amount of short-term guests because it's going to be a lot more profitable for them to do so. They can grow this market really large without really spending that much money because they don't need to hire that much support staff in order to support this long-term market because there's not that many guests. So what's going to happen, I think, is that their revenue will explode from this new nomadic lifestyle market, and all this new revenue is going to go straight towards their bottom line, and they're going to be extremely profitable. I think when people are analyzing the stock, they're not really appreciating this new type of market that is developing. So that's all for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.